On our wedding night, my wife slipped off her veil, looked at me like a stranger, and whispered, "I'm tired," before walking out of the room. I tried to laugh it off, until midnight, when a low, unmistakable sound crawled through the hallway, moans coming from my father's room. My hands shook as I opened the door, and what I saw shattered my reality. My wife inside, her wedding dress thrown on the floor, and my father standing there, pale, terrified, guilty. I lunged forward, but she didn't scream or apologize. She just stared at me and said, "You really thought you married me for love." That single sentence pulled me into a nightmare. Desperate for answers, I started digging, and uncovered something far worse than betrayal. My father had secretly transferred assets into her name before the wedding, using her as a shield to hide debt and dirty deals. She confessed she'd been planted in my life on purpose. My father promised to pay her mother's hospital bills and keep her brother out of prison, forcing her into a contract marriage. As I chased security footage, messages, and a manipulated prenup, I realized the entire wedding was staged to make me the scapegoat. If you want the full story and the twist that turns everything upside down, subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. I dropped my son off at school like I always did. Same route, same stoplight that never stayed green long enough, same quick wave through the window before he disappeared into the building. He was 16 and trying hard to look like he didn't need me anymore, but he still glanced back every morning. That glance kept me steady more than I liked to admit. Work started before I even reached the office. My phone buzzed with a driver stuck outside Macon, a warehouse delay in Decatur, and an email from a client who always acted like the world would end if his freight arrived 5 minutes late. I handled it the way I handled everything. Calm voice, short answers, no drama. People at the company called me dependable. Marcus will fix it. Marcus will figure it out. I let them believe that. It was easier than explaining how tired I was of carrying things no one else wanted to carry. By early afternoon, I was on the road to Charleston. The wedding was the next day, and my father had treated the entire week like a campaign. He called me while I drove, then again when I stopped for gas, then once more while I sat in traffic. "You got the final guest list?" "Dad, I'm driving." That's not an answer. He never asked if I was okay. He asked what needed to be done. Like my life was a set of tasks he assigned, and I completed. At the hotel in Charleston, he was already in the lobby, dressed like he owned the place. He talked to the manager, pointed at the seating chart, counted envelopes from the rehearsal dinner like he was balancing a ledger. "You're letting Elena's side bring too many people," he said. "That's how families take advantage." Elena stood beside me in a soft dress, hands folded, eyes lowered. She smiled when someone spoke to her, but she didn't look at me the way she used to, not with warmth, not with nerves, more like she was waiting for instructions. At dinner, my father leaned across the table and slid a folder in front of me. "Sign these, we're behind. It's wedding paperwork." The stack was thick, too thick to be harmless. I flipped the first page and saw legal language, names, numbers. My stomach tightened. "What is this?" "Just routine. Don't start acting like a lawyer, Marcus. Sign it." Elena's gaze drifted to the folder, then away. No protest, no question. Her silence pressed against my ribs. I could have pushed back, could have told him to slow down, let me read, let me breathe. Instead, I picked up the pen. I signed. The moment the ink dried, my father gathered the papers like he'd won something and tucked them under his arm. He didn't thank me. He didn't even nod. He just stood and walked off to greet another guest. I stayed seated, staring at the empty spot where the folder had been. A few minutes later, I stepped outside the hotel and stood on the front steps. Cars rolled by, laughter spilled through the glass doors behind me. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't answer it. For the first time, it hit me plain and sharp. My silence wasn't keeping peace. It was erasing me. I exhaled, took my keys out of my pocket and walked toward my car. I parked near the church and checked my tie in the rearview mirror, not because I cared how I looked, but because my hands needed something to do. My son sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through his phone like he wasn't about to watch his dad get married again. "You good?" he asked without looking up. "I'm good." That was our language. Short, simple, no extra weight. Inside, people hugged me, slapped my shoulder, told me I deserved happiness like it was a reward for staying alive long enough. I thanked them and kept moving. Elena was down the aisle with her bridesmaids, and even from where I stood, I noticed her eyes drifting past me, searching for my father. Calvin stood near the front row, whispering to the usher, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. "Move those flowers," he told a volunteer. "They're blocking the view." It was my wedding, but it felt like his event. I told myself to let it go. The day wasn't about pride. It was about family, about starting over, about giving my son a home that didn't feel like it was missing something all the time. When Elena reached me, she didn't squeeze my hands the way I expected. Her fingers were cool, her grip light, like she was holding on to something else in her head. "You look handsome," she said. "You look beautiful." The vows came and went. People clapped, someone cried, cameras flashed. I kissed her because that's what you do, and the crowd cheered like they'd just watched a happy ending. At the reception, Calvin worked the room like a politician. He thanked guests for coming, made jokes, made sure everyone knew he'd paid for the band. Every time Elena drifted away from me, she ended up close to him, standing a little too near, listening a little too hard. I found her near the dessert table and touched her elbow. "You okay?" She nodded fast. "I'm just overwhelmed." Before I could ask anything else, Calvin stepped between us with a grin. "Marcus, pictures. Now." He didn't wait for an answer. He never did. By late afternoon, we were in the car heading to Savannah. Elena sat in the front seat beside me. My son rode in the back, earbuds in, watching the road slide past like it had nothing to do with him. Calvin followed in his own car, texting me directions even though I had GPS. Halfway there, my phone buzzed again. "Don't let her family push you around," Calvin wrote. "A man has to know how to sacrifice, but he also has to lead." I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. Sacrifice, lead, his favorite words. The same ones he'd used when my mother died, when I worked 2 jobs, when I missed school plays and birthdays because the bills didn't care about feelings. Elena glanced at me. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just dad being dad." She looked forward again and didn't speak. We checked into the Savannah hotel after dark. Calvin insisted on being on the same floor. He said it was for convenience. I didn't argue. My son went to his room across the hall, and I walked Elena to ours. Inside, she stood in the middle of the room like she didn't know where to put herself. I started loosening my tie, trying to shake off the noise of the day. Elena reached up, unpinned her veil, and laid it on the dresser. No smile, no laugh, no nervous energy, just a blank calm. "I'm tired," she said. That was it. She didn't wait for me to respond. She grabbed her small overnight bag, brushed past me, and walked out. The latch clicked behind her. I stood there for a second, still holding the end of my tie, staring at the closed door like it might explain itself. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, suit still on, shoes still on, and listened to the hallway sounds fade. Somewhere down the corridor, a door shut. I checked my phone. No message, no apology, nothing. And in the silence, a thought landed in my chest. Quiet, steady, and wrong. This wasn't just exhaustion. I took my jacket off and hung it on the back of the chair, more out of habit than comfort. The room felt too neat for what my head was doing. I checked the bathroom, checked the closet, checked my phone again, like she might have left a note somewhere by accident. Nothing. I sat down, then stood up, then sat again. A man can handle silence when he understands it. That silence didn't have a reason. Across the hall, my son's TV hummed faintly through his door. It was enough to remind me I wasn't alone in the building, but it didn't calm anything. I texted Elena once, "Where are you?" The message stayed on delivered. No typing bubble. No answer. Time moved in short, weird chunks after that. I brushed my teeth without tasting the toothpaste. I paced to the window and back without noticing what was outside. At some point I lay down, still in my dress shirt, and stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. Then I heard it. At first, it was so soft I convinced myself it came from the TV next door. A low sound, broken, like someone trying not to be heard. The kind of noise you'd ignore if it was coming from a stranger's room, because it wasn't your business. But it wasn't coming from a stranger's room. It came again, clearer this time, followed by a breathy gasp. I sat up, heart kicking hard enough to make my chest ache. The hallway outside my door had gone quiet, the way it does after midnight when people finally give up on being polite and go to sleep. The sound slid down the hall. I opened my door and stepped out barefoot. The carpet felt cold under my feet. A few feet away, a soft moan rose and cut off like a hand had covered someone's mouth. My stomach tightened. It was coming from my father's room. I stopped in front of his door and stood there longer than I should have, hoping my brain would find another explanation. Maybe a movie. Maybe he'd fallen asleep with something playing. Maybe somebody else had the same room number on another floor. Anything. My hand reached for the handle anyway. The knob turned too easily. Unlocked. I pushed the door open. The first thing I saw wasn't my father's face. It was Elena's wedding dress on the floor, spread out like it had been thrown. My lungs forgot how to work. My father stood by the bed in his undershirt, staring at me like a man caught in a fire. His eyes were wide, his mouth open, but no sound came out. He looked older in that second, smaller, like the power had drained out of him. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, hair loose, shoulders bare under a hotel robe. She didn't scramble. She didn't cover herself. She didn't even flinch. She turned her head and met my eyes with something empty in her expression, like she'd already decided how this was going to go. I moved forward on instinct. Anger, panic, shock, everything tangled together and pushed me toward her. "What the hell is this?" I said, and my voice cracked. My father lifted his hands like he was going to explain, but his fingers trembled. He looked at Elena like he was waiting for her to save him. She didn't. She studied me the way someone studies a stranger in a waiting room, then spoke in a calm voice that didn't match the scene at all. "Did you really think you married me for love?" The sentence didn't land like an insult. It landed like a door slamming shut inside my head. I wanted to shout. I wanted to grab my father by the collar. I wanted to demand that Elena say it was a mistake, a cruel misunderstanding, a nightmare. Nothing came out. Air sat heavy in my throat. My hands stayed clenched at my sides because I didn't trust them near anyone. I stood there, staring at the dress on the floor, staring at my father's face, staring at the woman I had just promised my life to. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket, loud in the silence. I didn't look at it yet. I just turned and walked back into the hallway, leaving the door open behind me as my bare feet carried me toward my own room. The phone kept vibrating in my pocket while I walked, but I didn't stop to check it. The hallway felt too narrow, like it was pushing me forward whether I wanted to move or not. My room door shut behind me, and I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I grabbed my keys from the dresser, slipped my shoes on without tying them, and went right back out. The elevator took too long. When the doors finally opened to the lobby, I kept my head down and passed the front desk like I belonged to someone else's life. The night air hit my face outside, and it helped, just enough to keep me from doing something stupid. My car was in the back corner of the lot. I climbed in, locked the doors, and sat there with both hands gripping the steering wheel. My heart beat so hard it felt like it was trying to escape. Breathing turned shallow. Sweat gathered along my hairline. A minute passed, maybe two. The shaking in my fingers eased enough for me to pull my phone out. A message from my father blinked on the screen. "Don't overreact. Come back to your room." That was it. No question, no explanation. No hint of surprise that I'd walked in on what I'd walked in on. Just instructions. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my email and scrolled through the thread titled "Wedding Documents." I had ignored it for days because I trusted the people around me, because I wanted peace, because I didn't want to be the groom who argued over paperwork. The folder my father had pushed across the dinner table came back to me like a punch. His voice. Just routine. I searched for prenup. My own name popped up in attachments. I opened the PDF. Pages of legal language filled the screen. I skimmed, then slowed down. My eyes caught a line about property assignment and asset transfers. It listed a trust I'd never heard of. It referenced a notarization date from 2 weeks earlier, in Charleston, while I had been in Atlanta working double shifts. My throat went dry. I scrolled to the signature block. There it was, my signature, clear as day. I stared until the letters stopped looking like my handwriting and started looking like something copied. A second file sat in the same email, same title, different timestamp. I opened that one. The terms didn't match. The routine language was different. The clause about Elena's name wasn't there. 2 versions. One I remembered seeing briefly, one I never saw at all. I leaned back in the seat and let out a breath that sounded more like a laugh. except nothing about it was funny. I called Elena, straight to voicemail. Again, voicemail. I texted her instead. Answer me. No response. My thumb hovered over my father's contact. I hated that it was in my phone at all, like he'd earned permanent access to me. I hit call. He answered on the second ring, like he'd been waiting. "What did you do?" I asked. My voice came out low, controlled, but it shook at the edges. A pause, a soft exhale. "Marcus," he said, like I was a child who'd broken a glass. "Get back to your room. Don't make this a scene." "A scene?" I repeated. "I walked into your room and you walked into something you don't understand," he cut in. "This is family. You keep it in the family." The audacity of it landed harder than the betrayal. Not the act, the expectation. The way he spoke like I existed to absorb messes and protect his name. "Where is Elena?" I asked. "She's fine." "Is she?" His tone sharpened. "Listen to me. You're a grown man. You know what's at stake. Don't embarrass us." Us. Not me. Not my son. Not my marriage. Us. His image. His control. His comfort. I ended the call without saying goodbye and dropped the phone in my lap. My eyes drifted back to the prenup on the screen. The changed wording. The dates. The notarization. The signature that wasn't mine. My father didn't sound shocked because this hadn't happened by accident. He sounded like a man following a script. I opened my notes app, started typing every detail I could remember, then pulled up the hotel's email confirmation to find the number for security. My finger hovered over the call button as I sat in the parked car, staring at the screen. My finger came off the call button before it connected. Hotel security could wait. Police could wait. Right then, I needed to know where my son was, and whether Elena planned to walk back into my room like nothing happened. I drove around the block once just to burn off the adrenaline, then parked again and texted my son. "You awake?" A minute later he replied, "Yeah, why?" "Stay in your room. Lock the door." He sent back a question mark. I didn't answer. Some things don't belong on a screen. By the time the sun came up, the parking lot had started to fill. People in business clothes wheeled suitcases toward the entrance. Someone laughed too loud near the valet stand. Life kept moving. Mine didn't. I went back inside and stood near the elevator banks, pretending I was waiting on coffee. Elena stepped out a few minutes later. No veil, no gown. She wore jeans and a hoodie, hair pulled back like she'd spent the night at a friend's place instead of my father's room. When she saw me, she froze. I didn't raise my voice, didn't step toward her fast. I just pointed to the side hallway away from the lobby. "We need to talk." She followed, but her shoulders stayed tight, chin tucked like she was already rehearsing how she'd cry. "Marcus, listen." "No, you listen," I said. "Where were you last night?" Her eyes glistened instantly. That was her first move. Tears before truth. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "Your father, he..." "Don't do that. Don't make him the only villain and you the helpless one. I saw you." She swallowed hard, then leaned against the wall like her legs couldn't hold her. "He promised to help me," she said. "My mother's in the hospital in Miami. Her insurance ran out. And my brother? He got arrested. He's stupid. He made a mistake, but he's all I have. Your father said he could make it go away. He said he had lawyers. He said he had connections." The words came fast, messy, practiced. The kind of story people use when they want you to focus on pain instead of choices. "So you married me," I said, keeping my voice even. "Because my father told you to." Her silence answered before her mouth did. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I swear." "You signed documents, Elena." She blinked. I didn't know what was in them." "Stop." I opened the prenup. There are two versions. One has my signature on a notarized page dated when I wasn't even in Charleston. Her face drained. That reaction was the first honest thing I'd seen from her. "I didn't do that," she said, but it sounded weak. Like she knew it didn't matter whether her hand held the pen or not. I held my palm out. "Give me your phone." She clutched it tighter. "Why?" "Because you've been talking to him. Because there are messages. Because there's proof. Give it to me." "No," she said, voice rising just a little. "You can't." "I can," I said. "And if you don't, my lawyer will get a court order, and you'll hand it over anyway." That did it. Her eyes widened in real fear, not staged sorrow. She took a step back, like the hallway had suddenly turned into a corner. "You have a lawyer?" she asked. "I've always had a lawyer," I said. "I just didn't think I'd need him for my own wedding." She stared at me, breathing quick. Then she turned and walked away without another word, pulling her hoodie tighter as if that could protect her. I watched her disappear around the corner, then pulled my phone out and texted Darius. "You up?" He called me immediately. "Where are you?" "Savannah." "What happened?" I told him the short version. No details, just the facts I couldn't ignore. A long pause filled the line. I could hear him thinking, the way he did when he was building a case. "Marcus," he said finally, voice flat. "This isn't cheating." I leaned against the wall, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the elevator doors as they opened and closed. "Then what is it?" "It's fraud." Darius didn't waste time on sympathy. He never did. That's why I called him. "You need to treat this like a case," he said, "not like a marriage problem." I walked out of the hotel and drove to a small diner a few blocks away. The kind of place where nobody asks questions, and the coffee tastes like it's been sitting too long. I ordered breakfast I didn't touch and opened my laptop. Darius stayed on the phone while I pulled up every message thread I could find. "Save everything," he told me. "Screenshots, timestamps, call logs. Don't delete anything. Don't threaten anybody. Let them keep talking." I did what I'd always done at work when something broke. Stopped panicking and started sorting. First, the hotel. I walked back in like I belonged there and asked for the manager. A middle-aged woman with a tight bun met me near the front desk. I kept my voice steady. "There was an incident last night. I need the security footage from the 4th floor hallway." Between midnight and 2 a.m., her eyes narrowed. "We can't just release footage." "I understand," I said. "I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking you to preserve it. My attorney will send the request today." That word, attorney, changed the air. She nodded once and wrote down my room number. Next, the paper trail. I forwarded the prenup emails to a private folder. I downloaded both versions, saved them to a drive, then emailed copies to my work address and my lawyer. I took screenshots of the notarization dates and the file timestamps. The details mattered. They always did. My father called twice. I didn't answer. He texted instead. "Come downstairs. We need to talk." I left it on red. The hardest part was staying quiet, not because I wanted to explode, but because I knew Calvin. If he sensed panic, he'd feed on it. If he sensed fear, he'd push harder. So I acted normal. I checked on my son, told him we were extending our stay one more night because of work stuff. He didn't like it, but he didn't argue. Teenagers learn early when their parents are holding something back. By noon, I was at the airport. I told my father I had to fly to Atlanta for an urgent issue at the warehouse. He didn't question it. He liked anything that sounded like responsibility. In Atlanta, I went straight to my attorney's office in Midtown. Charles Weller was a calm man with silver hair and a habit of reading everything twice. He listened without interrupting while I laid out the facts. No drama, just dates, documents, and what I'd seen. He flipped through the prenup copies and tapped the notarization page with his pen. "This is serious, Marcus." "I know. We'll request the footage. We'll subpoena the phone records if we have to. But I want you to do something right now." "What?" "Check your accounts, every one of them." So I did. Checking took less than 15 minutes to find the first hit. A transfer I didn't recognize. Another one, weeks earlier. Both labeled as trust distribution. Both linked to an account in Elena's name. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. Charles leaned back and exhaled. "This isn't just family mess," he said. "This is financial fraud. And if your father's involved, there may be more." I left his office with a folder under my arm and a plan in my head. By evening, I was back on a plane to Savannah, moving through the airport like a man who didn't want to be seen. When I landed, my phone buzzed as soon as it connected to service. Unknown number, one line. "Stop digging, or your son gets hurt." My thumb froze above the screen. The message sat there, plain and clean, like it had been typed without emotion. I stared at it while people walked past me with their luggage and their normal lives, then turned my phone face down and kept walking toward the exit. I didn't show that message to anyone at the airport, not yet. I saved a screenshot, forwarded it to Charles, then slipped my phone back in my pocket and drove to the hotel like I was heading to a meeting I couldn't miss. My son was in his room with the chain latched, like I'd told him. He opened the door just enough to see my face. "What's going on?" he asked. "Nothing you need to worry about," I said. "Just stay close to me tonight." He didn't like that answer, but he nodded. Downstairs, the lobby had a different kind of energy than it did the night before. Too many people sitting together, too many quiet conversations. My father's voice floated from the breakfast area, loud and smooth. I followed it. Calvin sat at a table surrounded by relatives, a cup of coffee in his hand like he was hosting a morning show. Elena sat near him, wrapped in a cardigan, eyes red, shoulders slumped. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was the one who'd been betrayed. The second my father saw me, his mouth tightened into something almost like concern. "There he is," he said. "Son, come sit down." Nobody moved. Every face turned toward me. I stayed standing. "What is this?" I asked. He sighed like he was tired. "I'm trying to handle this before it gets worse. People are worried. Elena's worried." Elena dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "Marcus, I didn't want it to go like this," she whispered. My aunt leaned forward. "Baby, were you drinking last night?" she asked softly. I stared at her. "Excuse me?" Calvin shook his head slowly, like he hated admitting it. "He had too much at the reception," he said. "He got emotional. He came to my room yelling, accusing people of things that didn't happen. I tried to calm him down. A cousin I barely spoke to muttered something about stress. Another one said, he's been through a lot. They started building the story for him, like they always did. Anything that protected the family name. I looked at Elena. "Did I imagine your dress on the floor?" I asked. Her eyes dropped. You were scaring me," she said. "You didn't seem like yourself." The way she said it made my stomach turn. Not because she lied, because she lied easily. Calvin took over again. "Son, you don't want to ruin your own life over a misunderstanding. You're a respected man. You've got a kid, a career. Don't throw it away because you got upset. Misunderstanding." I felt my face go still. No anger on the outside, but something inside me hardened. Not rage, decision. "You're doing this on purpose," I said quietly. His eyebrows lifted, offended. "Doing what?" "Turning me into the problem." He leaned back in his chair and spread his hands. "Marcus, I'm trying to protect you." That word, protect. The same word he used every time he controlled me. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. Not there. Not in front of people who'd already chosen the version they preferred. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard my uncle say, "Just give him time," like I was a storm that would pass. I went up to my son's room, packed our bags, and checked us out without making eye contact with the clerk. 10 minutes later, we were on the road to Atlanta. He sat in the passenger seat, watching me instead of his phone. "Dad, are we okay?" he asked. "We will be." That was all I could offer without breaking something I couldn't put back together. By the time we reached the city, my phone had filled with missed calls. Calvin, Elena, relatives, people who wanted me to fall back in line. At the office the next morning, I walked into a meeting I didn't schedule. HR sat at the table. My supervisor sat beside them, eyes tired. A printed email lay face down in front of each person. The HR manager cleared her throat. "Marcus, we received an anonymous complaint last night," she said. "It alleges misuse of company funds." My jaw tightened. "That's false." "We understand you're saying that," she replied, voice practiced. "But we have to investigate." I turned the paper over. Someone had written a full report, complete with dates and vendor names, all chosen carefully enough to look believable at first glance. Not a sloppy lie, a targeted one. My supervisor didn't meet my eyes. "This is temporary, Marcus, just until we sort it out." Temporary. Like reputation ever healed quickly. I walked out without raising my voice. No slamming doors, no cursing. I went to my car and sat in the lot, the same way I'd done in Savannah, only this time the city felt too familiar to be comforting. I opened my wallet and pulled out the photo of my son from middle school. Missing teeth, big smile. A boy who still believed his dad was unbreakable. My hands shook for a second, then steadied. I called Darius. He picked up on the first ring. "Yeah?" I stared at the steering wheel, then at the complaint paper folded on the passenger seat. "I want to do this the right way," I said. "By the law. All the way. There was a pause, then his voice sharpened. Good, because now it's war on paper, not in the hallway. Give me everything you've got. Darius showed up at my place before sunrise, carrying a plain manila folder like it weighed more than paper. He didn't knock twice. He never did that when things were casual. My son was still asleep. I made coffee and kept my voice low. What do you have? Darius set the folder on the kitchen table and slid it toward me. A name, he said, and a window. I opened it and saw a printed email chain, the kind people forget can be recovered even after they delete it. My father's name was on it. So was a company I didn't recognize. The subject line was short and clean. Transfer schedule. Darius pointed at a paragraph halfway down the page. Read that part. I did. Slowly. It talked about moving assets before any formal inquiry becomes public. It mentioned a pending financial crimes review. It listed properties, account numbers, and a deadline that matched the week before my wedding. There was a line about placing holdings under Elena Rivera's name temporarily. Another line instructed someone to keep Marcus unaware until everything is filed. I set the paper down like it was hot. Who gave you this? A former employee of your dad's, Darius said. Guy named Leonard. Worked for him years ago. He's been trying to stay invisible since he left. Why would he talk now? Darius shrugged. Because your dad burned him. And because he's scared. People like Calvin don't leave loose ends unless they think the loose end can't speak. I stared at the email again, then at my own hands. The anger didn't come loud. It came sharp and quiet, like a blade sliding out. Darius tapped the table. Leonard will meet you, but you need to keep it clean. No threats, no emotion, just facts. Where? Stone Mountain Park. Parking lot near the walking trail. Noon. Public place. I nodded once. By the time noon hit, I had already sent copies of the email to Charles, labeled, time-stamped, and backed up twice. The complaint from my job sat in my glove compartment, folded and untouched. I didn't want it taking up space in my head. It was a distraction. Calvin wanted me scattered. That wasn't happening. Stone Mountain was crowded enough to feel safe, but not so crowded you couldn't have a private talk. Leonard stood near a vending machine, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the lot like he expected a car to pull up any second. He looked like a man who'd spent a long time paying attention to exits. I walked up and kept my posture relaxed. Leonard? He glanced at me, then nodded. You Marcus. Yeah. He didn't offer a handshake. I didn't either. Darius said you had something for me. Leonard pulled out a flash drive and held it out like he didn't want his fingerprints on it. That email chain ain't even the whole thing, he said. Your dad been moving stuff for months. Different names, different accounts. That woman, Elena, she ain't just some poor girl getting pushed around. Tell me what you know. He swallowed, then spoke fast like he'd rehearsed it. She signed for money, cashier's checks. I saw one myself. She met your dad at his office twice. I saw her come out smiling like she got what she wanted. They called it the shield. That's what they said. She was the shield. I kept my face still. Why would she do it? Leonard let out a tired laugh. Same reason most folks do. Money and leverage. Your dad promised her family help. Yeah, but he also promised her a cut. He shifted his weight and lowered his voice. And that night, the hotel thing, it wasn't random. Your dad wanted you to see it, want you shook, wanted you signing whatever he put in front of you next. My stomach tightened, not with surprise, but with confirmation. The pieces lined up too perfectly. The moans, the unlocked door, the dress on the floor. Elena's empty eyes when she said that sentence. Not love, not even lust, control. You're sure? I asked. Leonard's gaze held mine for a moment. Man, I quit working for your dad because I knew he'd drag me into some mess. He drags everybody into mess. That's how he stays clean. He glanced over my shoulder, then stepped back. That flash drive got more emails and some bank slips. I ain't staying to talk longer. You didn't get it from me. He walked away without waiting for a response. I stood there with the flash drive in my hand and watched him disappear into the crowd. A couple pushed a stroller past me. Kids ran toward the grass. People laughed like nothing in the world could touch them. My phone buzzed. Elena. I let it ring. Darius watched from his car a few spaces away. He nodded once, like he understood. I slid into my own car, plugged the flash drive into my laptop, and started copying everything onto a secure folder. More transfers, more names. A scanned document with Elena's signature next to numbers that made my throat tighten again. Not a desperate woman clinging to survival, a willing participant. I didn't call her back. I didn't call my father either. Every urge to confront them rose and fell, and each time I pushed it down. Loud fights belong to people with nothing else. Evidence belonged to people who planned to leave with their dignity intact. I emailed the full folder to Charles, then added Darius to the thread. My hands stayed steady as I typed. When I finished, I closed the laptop and stared at the steering wheel for a long moment, breathing slow, letting the plans settle in my bones. Then I started the engine and drove back toward the city. The meeting room I booked in Savannah looked like every other hotel conference space. Plain chairs, a long table, a phone nobody used. That was the point. No comfort, no distractions, just paper and voices. I arrived early, checked the recorder in my pocket, then placed my phone face down on the table, with the screen recording active. Georgia is a one-party consent state. Charles had reminded me twice. I wasn't there to be dramatic. I was there to document. Calvin walked in first, carrying a folder like he'd been waiting for this moment. Elena followed, eyes puffy, mascara smudged. She looked like someone who wanted sympathy on sight. My father didn't sit right away. He stood behind the chair at the head of the table, claiming it without saying a word. "So," he said, voice smooth, "you finally decided to act like a man and handle this privately." I kept my tone flat. "That's why I asked you here. I don't want noise." Elena exhaled shakily. "Marcus, I never wanted to hurt you." Calvin waved his hand like she was a child interrupting adults. "Save it. He needs to sign these. Then we can put this behind us." He slid the folder toward me and tapped it with his finger. "It's simple. You sign, Elena gets what she's owed, and the family stays intact." I didn't open the folder. "What is it?" "Settlement," he said. "You'll keep your reputation. She'll keep her dignity. Everybody wins." Elena's lip trembled. "My mom is sick, Marcus. You don't understand what it's like to have nothing and—" "Stop," I said quietly. She blinked, surprised I didn't soften. Calvin leaned forward. "Listen to me," he said. "You're my son. You carry this family. You do what needs to be done. You always have." There it was, the line he used like a leash. "I saw the transfers," I said. His face didn't change. "You saw what I allowed you to see. That money was protected. You should be thanking me." Elena glanced at him, then back at me. "I didn't know everything," she whispered. "I only signed because he promised." "You signed because you wanted the shield," I said, "and you took the checks." Her breathing hitched. For a second, her eyes flashed with anger before she pulled the tears back in place. Calvin's voice turned sharper. "Don't start accusing her. You're the one who walked into my room like a drunk lunatic. That's what people remember." I let the silence stretch. Not to punish him, to let him talk. Men like Calvin bury themselves when they think they're winning. He took the bait. "You want to ruin yourself? Fine. I'll call your job. I'll call your clients. I'll tell them you're unstable. I'll tell them you've been drinking again. And if you think you can hide behind your little son, I'll bring him into it too. I'll make sure his school hears about it. I'll make sure his friends hear about it." Elena whispered my name like she was worried for me, but she didn't tell him to stop. My hands stayed still on the table. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. "You done?" I asked. Calvin scoffed. "You don't have a choice." A knock hit the door. Calvin frowned like someone had interrupted his show. The door opened, and Charles walked in with a man in a suit and a woman holding a badge. Darius stepped in behind them, eyes hard, posture calm. The woman spoke first. "Calvin Grant?" My father's smile twitched. "Who are you?" "Financial Crimes Unit," she said. "You're being served." The man in the suit placed a set of papers on the table. Charles set down a thick envelope beside it. I watched Calvin's eyes flick from the badge to the documents, then back to me. Confusion drained into fear so fast it almost looked like weakness. "Marcus," he started. Charles didn't let him finish. "We have surveillance footage from the hotel hallway, bank records, notarization discrepancies, and evidence of coercion and threats," he said, "including threats involving a minor." Calvin's face went pale. Elena's sob caught in her throat, sharp and sudden. The investigator flipped open her notepad. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us." Calvin's hand went to the folder he brought, as if he could still control something if he held it tight enough. Paper crinkled under his grip. He looked at me again, searching for the old version of me, the quiet son who swallowed everything. I didn't give him that. I stayed seated while the investigator asked him to stand, and Darius moved to the side of the door without speaking. The courthouse in downtown Atlanta didn't feel heavy. It felt routine, like a place that had seen every kind of mess and stopped reacting to any of it. People walked through security with tired faces, holding folders like they were groceries. Nobody stared at me. Nobody cared who my father used to be. That was the first relief. Charles met me near the courtroom doors. He handed me a copy of the filing and spoke like he was reading the weather. "They're charging him with fraud, forgery, unlawful transfer of assets, and witness intimidation," he said. "The threat involving your son pushed this into a different category." I nodded. My mouth stayed dry. "And Elena?" I asked. "Civil suit is filed. The DA is looking at her role. Her attorney requested a deal, but that depends on what she turns over." No one asked how I felt. Charles didn't. Darius didn't. That was another relief. Feelings were for after the facts. Inside the courtroom, the judge took the bench and called the case like it was one of 100. My father was brought in wearing a plain jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, ankles chained. He glanced around, searching for familiar faces that could still protect him. When his eyes landed on me, something in him shifted. Anger, disbelief, maybe even shame. He looked smaller. Not because the cuffs made him small, because the story he'd built about himself didn't work in this room. The prosecutor read the charges. Each one hit like a nail. Fraud, forgery, financial deception, illegal transfers, coercion, threats. When threats against a minor child was said out loud, my father's head snapped up. His attorney whispered something in his ear. My father's jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but the judge didn't care what he wanted. I watched him listen to the numbers, how much money moved, when it moved, whose name it sat under. His eyes drifted toward the ceiling like he was trying to escape into the old days, back when people listened to him. Nobody did. Elena wasn't in the room. Charles told me she'd been advised to stay away. Her attorney had already started spinning the story. Forced, pressured, manipulated. It didn't matter. Her signature was on the checks. Her name was on the transfers. Her part was recorded in cold ink. The hearing ended without a dramatic moment. No crying, no shouting. Just a judge setting dates, an officer guiding my father away, and lawyers turning to new cases like they'd never seen our faces. In the hallway, my father tried once. "Marcus," he said, voice rough, "you're really going to do this to me?" I looked at him for a second, not as my father, as a man who had chosen to use his own son like a shield. "I didn't do this to you," I said. That was all. I walked past him and kept going. That evening I stopped at the grocery store on the way home, bought chicken, rice, and the vegetables my son pretended not to like. At the house I washed my hands, turned on the stove, and started cooking without thinking too hard about the day. My son sat at the kitchen table, finishing homework, sneaking glances at me. "Is it over?" he asked. "It's handled," I said. He nodded, then went back to his work like he trusted that answer. After dinner, I loaded the dishwasher, wiped the counters, and checked the locks twice. Old habits don't disappear overnight. When the house finally quieted, I sat on the edge of my bed and answered one email from HR with documents Charles had prepared. No emotions, just proof. The next morning I drove my son to school. He got out, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and paused. "Love you, Dad," he said, almost like it was an afterthought. "Love you too," I replied. He walked inside without looking back this time. On the way home, I pulled into an empty lot near the field behind the school and turned the engine off. The steering wheel felt cool under my hands. My phone sat in the cup holder, silent. I stayed there for a while, not thinking about revenge or closure, not waiting for apologies that were never coming, just breathing. just letting the quiet belong to me.